got nothing but kind of gratitude really for the speakers that have gone before me tonight. Just bringing that real world and that imagination and that inspiration to the table and to their talks. I live in an ivory tower. I work in an ivory tower in terms of education. So it's always awesome for me to be able to hear what is actually happening away from education. But just going on to my talk, first of all, I'll just let you know who we are, because I'm nothing without our school, without our team, without the people that contribute to the success of our students. We have a team of about 45 academic staff in our school. 20 of those teach in the computing area. Obviously, we also have electrical and applied technology academics as well. In computing, we specialise in networking and cybersecurity and software development and data management and analytics. And we teach across a range of levels in the framework. So we have a certificate for returning to learn, or for students who want to leave school and just do something. So, we start at level 4, and we actually still also are teaching a doctorate program at level 10. So the breadth of knowledge and expertise and experience in our teaching team is awesome, and our success rates are fantastic. I'm so lucky to work with the team that I work with, and that's why I think it is my dream job, because I work with this group of excited, interesting, passionate people who care about the same things that I care about. So it isn't like working, really. So who am I? And when I think about this, it was interesting. Robyn said she graduated in 1991. I graduated in 1995, also from the University of Waikato, and also with a computing qualification. And but I was already quite old, as in I was already a mother. I had my first child when I went to university, and I do know what Robyn was talking about with huge classes and trying to kind of fit as a student into that space. What I did realise was that up to that point, the aspirations that had guided me had never been my own. So my parents had aspirations for me, but they weren't really that big. I mean, my parents, I love them and I continue to love them, but their horizons were small and their expectations of their children fit those horizons. I left school at the end of my 5th form year, so I didn't do university entrance, I didn't do any of those kinds of qualifications, and I went into my first piece of work, and really all I wanted to do was earn some money so that I could travel overseas. So after graduating and moving into education, because I did move after a couple of years, I went into education, and I realized that now my aspirations were actually about other people. They were about my students, and they were about my own children and the horizons that I wanted them to see. So I have had a life of aspirations, and I continue to do that. When I do that for our students now, and I'm incredibly grateful that I can have that idea of hope. But when we're talking about skills for the future, this is my first skill for you, is have aspirations of your own. And just stop and think about that. Stop and think, do I actually have aspirations for myself, or am I living somebody else's? So that's just my first skill for this slide. When I was at university, what I discovered was it was new. Computing was new. It was computing, and it was providing opportunities, I thought, for huge advances in things that were going to make difficult lives easier. So I had this great hope for the future around things like assistive tech. And yes, we have pulled together some assistive tech over the past times. We've had braille keyboards, as I said, voice to text devices, so that allows people who are unable to write or type to still communicate in writing if they choose to. Speech recognition devices that allow those who can't talk to actually talk and communicate, things like motorized mobility devices. But these have just been tiny. Like the promise of tech to work in that space has really been overtaken because it's, capitalism, which requires, income, profit, revenue. There isn't a lot of profit in assistive tech. So it's kind of like been overtaking around that concept up to about 10 years ago, so that promise wasn't really taken up. Certainly we've had lots of improvements in the world of work because of tech. Certainly we've had lots of advances, but what has that really meant? It's meant that we can, as Michelle said, we can work longer, we can kind of output more, but are we actually achieving more, or are we achieving what it is that we wanted to achieve? And that's back to those aspirations again. We certainly have some great assistive tech now. There's certainly some good elements of tech for good right now. If we look at things like the way that we are connected and we can communicate, we are more connected than we have ever been before. We can communicate. Oh, this is a perfect example of it. I'm in my lounge in Morningside in Auckland. I don't actually go out a lot because, of COVID, but I'm able to communicate with all of you from wherever you might be. And we're doing this in a language way, which is a key form of communications for humans. So we have got those great facilities from tech. There's all of this information we can access like that. Google search, it's there. We have access to more information and at such speed that actually that's the scary bit, really, because what time do we have to analyze it? What time do we have to determine the trustworthiness of that information? It's just there. And when we look at things like teaching and learning aids, when we look at things like computerized mobility, we've really taken some major steps forward. Smart wheelchairs, they navigate according to GPS, so they know where they're going to go. They assess the route on the way, so they check for bumps and lumps in the pavement and make it a safe journey. It is amazing some of the things that we've been able to do. Mouth stick devices and other communication devices which allow people who are really severely disabled to still communicate. I put instant captioning in there because I actually think that's a really important tool, because it means that people who have issues with hearing, and that's not just deaf people, apparently captioning in our entertainment space is incredibly useful to an awful lot of people that aren't necessarily hard of hearing. And the avatar technology, which is kind of scary. And there's some really good, really lifelike. Someone was talking about healthcare. So Robyn was talking about the healthcare and the drones. Sorry, apologies, Robyn. And I've been looking at soul machines who have healthcare support via an avatar that's accessing the medical records and communicating in voice in an avatar environment with patients in their homes when I'm asking them questions. It's actually a bit spooky. I'm not going to show you that slide because it was a bit spooky, but I'm just going to quickly show you Kara Tech, which is avatar technology for signing for deaf communities. So, I mean, all using AI, all using machine learning to develop an understanding of the signs and put them together in a way that I'm assuming you can see that. And if we just come down to, there's a picture of the avatars, look very human-like, don't they? And this one here is actually telling us messages to do with COVID level 4. So it's a collection of avatars. There's messages that are pre-created using these avatars and technology. Now, the tricky bit is, can I get back to my slides? Didn't practice that. Excellent, I did. But if we're thinking now about the future, and Michelle was talking about the work she was doing at Tech Futures Lab. I'm incredibly fortunate. I'm studying at the Mind Lab, and I'm studying a qualification in leadership for good. So I have really started to think about how the world can be and what we need to do and what we need to start doing for good into the future. I have children, they don't have any children, but I'm hoping they will have one day, but for my grandchildren. So one of the things that we know we need to be really working towards and starting to do something, and tech can help with this, is looking at wicked problems. And Michelle brought one up before in terms of climate change. They're insolvable problems, and I think we should stop looking for solutions because there isn't a solution. What there is a collection of activities that we could try. They're complex, they're interdependent. You can't give something a go because the consequences of it not working is significant. So we face an awful lot of wicked problems, and actually the human race has probably faced them for a very long time. But now what we have is tech that can hopefully help us as we go forward. So some examples, and they're intertwined, aren't they? So homelessness, crime and punishment, poverty and income disparity, all connected together. You can solve one, but you may well cause domino effects in others. They connect together. You can't treat homelessness as a single problem on its own. Racism, extremism, terrorism, all linked together and working. And these are the things that we're going to take forward to future generations. War, that element of racism and extremism, climate change, which is what Michelle was talking about earlier, which is also massive for everybody. And because the other piece that we need to add in there is pandemics and how we respond to those now, because the wicked problem is there isn't going to be just this pandemic, we will have more. So tech can help, but actually tech can be a wicked problem in itself. So tech for bad, we are more connected than ever, but that means we're all susceptible to misinformation, and we need to be able to, as I said, analyze and decide what is this piece of information, how trustworthy is it? And as we are socially disconnected, but socially connected via our internet and online devices, we become more susceptible to misinformation because we're seeking connection, and we're seeking connection in a space that isn't physical anymore. People are anonymous, the anonymity in the online presence. We actually don't know who we're communicating and connecting with. We're vulnerable, and through a pandemic and lock-ins and things like that, we're even more vulnerable, and misinformation, and we want to be part of something. You know, we want to be connected and part of something. So it is a wicked problem, and it's all of these things connected together and dominoed together. So tech has contributed to some of the bad stuff as well. We also have those elements of equity of access. If you have access, then you have power. If you don't, then and if you need to have that access to be able to participate, where does that leave you? Where does it leave our homeless people when we tell them they just need to go and check the internet link for the local, for the closest shelter, and they don't have any way of doing that? And, you know, what are we going to do about things like that? So there's kind of these pieces that we need to think about as well. Cybercrime. You know, we have the ability now to steal huge amounts of money really easily, or to take from those vulnerable people that we were talking about before that want to be connected. You know, they want connection. You're giving them that. You just need an airfare, or your cousin just needs some help with their car. And this is how those poor vulnerable people get pulled into sending money to Nigeria or wherever it is. So it's not always for good, but I think it can help. This is my last slide, and it's actually just the beginning of let's think about how it can help, because there are so many ways that tech could contribute to solving or contributing to solutions to some of our wicked problems. It does, I think artificial intelligence and machine learning can start to do some of that work. We do need to be really careful with our bias. We do need to be really careful about the data sets, but we know that and we can program that in. And as our data sets increase, as we expand, our machine learning can start to learn from the mistakes of the past. It's something we can start thinking about and developing now. We can model those solutions. We can test solutions and their impacts into those interconnectedness without actually doing it. We can do it in these simulated environments to get a feel or get an understanding of how the dominoes might tumble with particular collections of solutions. And I think we're getting to the point now of maturity in machine learning, the maturity of the modeling, the maturity of the data to be able to start really doing some interesting work to understand some solutions. And I also told a fib because there is another slide. And the other slide is education, tech education, because that's where I am. What can we do in tech education to start students thinking about solving some of these problems? Our young people, and actually not so young people, are aware of the current social issues. They know what the future looks like and they know it's not great. We need to be encouraging them to, we can do this in our assessments. We can ask them to think about these social issues. We can ask them to think about programming to develop some solutions. We can ask them to think about design thinking to develop some of those solutions. And certainly we can rethink our program design. And instead of our programs being about skill sets, and I know skill sets and technical skills are really important, but instead of them being about that, maybe they should be about solving things with skills. So that's kind of my story and that's my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I realise that this is probably something I've been trying to talk about for a very long time, probably since 1995. And I'll hand you now back to Colart. Thank you.